Here are some of the strangest coincidences in history. Number 7. Titanic Prophesied. We are all familiar with the tragic story of the Titanic, a British passenger ship that claimed to be invincible. In case you're just not that good with history, the Titanic indeed did sink when it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean in 1912. The Titanic took down over 2,000 people with it and sank to the bottom of the sea. What's eerie about the whole thing is that the tragedy of Titanic had actually been prophesied by author Morgan Robertson in his novel titled Futility. The story in the book pretty much prophesied that what was going to happen to the Titanic 14 years after the book was released. The novel depicted a fictional ocean liner named Titan, which sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. The similarities in the story and what happened in real life are uncanny. Robertson's Titan was an ocean liner 800 feet long. The Titanic in real life was 882 feet long. Both were supposedly unsinkable British ships and sunk in the North Atlantic Ocean after being struck by an iceberg. The coincidence gets even weirder because Titan sunk in the exact same month as the Titanic in April. Both the ships didn't have sufficient lifeboats to rescue the passengers as well. Obviously, at that time, nobody paid too much attention to Robertson's work as being anything but fiction. It wasn't until the Titanic sank in 1912 that people began to realize the similarities and started to credit Robertson with clairvoyance. Robertson, however, played it off and explained that coincidences by his extensive knowledge of shipbuilding and maritime trends. All I can say is, interesting. Number 6. The Simpsons were in on Trump's victory. Sometimes there's more truth in pop culture prophecies than you think. How many people on Earth could have predicted a Trump presidency back in 2000? Okay, how many people on Earth predicted a Trump presidency in 2016? One of the most hilarious burns has to be when Obama told Trump on Jimmy Kimmel that at least he'd go down as a president when Trump said Obama would probably go down as the worst president in history. Well, yeah. Let's rewind it back to 2000. In an episode of The Simpsons, there's a scene in which Bart has a futuristic vision where Lisa has become president after Trump's reign and complains of the mess he's left. The country apparently inherited a huge debt from President Trump, and she was in a budget crunch. She was told that the country's financial resources are zero. Seriously, how many times are The Simpsons going to predict the future? Didn't they also predict the Ebola epidemic, the invention of smartwatches, and that of the iPod? Where's their information coming from? Obviously, Trump won the 2016 elections, but who knows? Maybe we'll have a female president named Lisa after Trump leaves office. Number 5. Twin occurrences. You guys ever noticed how twins are usually paraded around in the same outfit? Maybe sometimes that's a way to tell them apart from each other, but yet keeping them bonded at the same time? As twins grow up, that's a good chance that the twins pick up similar habits. But that's the case with anyone that spends a lot of time together. However, when twins are separated at birth and grow up completely away from each other, that's why things get interesting. Two identical twins, Jim Lewis and Jim Springer, were separated at birth when they were just 3 weeks old. But as adults, they discovered that they couldn't have been more alike. Each of the boys grew up in households 40 miles apart and had no contact with the other. Somehow, they were both named Jim by their adoptive parents and had similar tastes in childhood. They both had a strong dislike for spelling, and they both were interested in math. They both had a pet dog named Toy. Come on, they both were named Jim, and they both had dogs named Toy? Not that crazy. Hold up, let's fast forward a bit. They both married a woman named Linda. They both got divorced from Linda, and then remarried a woman named Betty. Okay, that's just pretty weird. Even both their sons were called James. Here's another one with twins. Brothers Erskine Eben and Neville Eben met the same fate in what plays out to be a ridiculously impossible coincidence. One of them was riding a moped back in 1975 when he got hit by a taxi and was killed. Shockingly, a year later, his brother was also killed while riding the same model moped by colliding with the same taxi carrying the same passenger as before. What kind of sick joke is this? Number 4. Real to real. Everyone knows Bruce Lee. Do I really need to give a description of who he is? Anyways, in one of his films called Game of Death, Bruce played a character who gets shot by a prop gun. The problem was that the gun was loaded with real bullets. The character was trying to fake his own death, except someone loaded a real bullet in the gun and the character is shot for real. Unfortunately, sometimes life imitates art. 15 years after the release of Game of Death, in a strange twist, Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee, died in the same way while filming The Crow. The prop gun used in the filming on the set somehow was loaded with a real bullet. The Game of Death was the movie that wrapped up Bruce Lee's final chapter in life, as it was the last film he was making. He passed away while filming, and his passing was filled with controversy. Rumors include that Bruce was murdered because he was involved with Chinese gangs, to him and his family just having a supposed curse. Both the Lees died while filming a movie, and the father played out at an event just like his son's years later. Number 3. A Platter of Richard Parker. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a book titled The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket in the year 1838. The plot is dark and keeps up with Poe's literary themes. The book is a turning point in the story, which has crew members aboard a lost ship drawing straws to decide which one of them would be sacrificed for food. I'm not sure which would be worse, having to eat someone or picking the wrong straw. The unlucky person in the story turned out to be a young cabin boy named Richard Parker, whose head, hands, and feet, or pretty much whatever parts weren't eaten in the story, were thrown overboard. As disturbing as this story is, stranger things are known to happen in Poe's stories. Unfortunately, this crazy story had a parallel in real life. Fast forward 46 years, and there was an actual incident where a ship, Mignonette, was wrecked. And you guessed it, since the crew members didn't have anything to eat, they too each had to draw straws to see who would actually become a meal. And guess who was the one who lost the draw? Richard Parker, the cabin boy. Much like in the story, the crew caught and ate a turtle, but that simply wasn't enough to keep them alive. So apparently they stabbed Parker multiple times in order to survive. Number 2. 2 presidents, 1 soul. Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy are 2 of the most famous presidents in American history. But did you know they were practically the same people? Or maybe Lincoln came back and relived his life as JFK. Anyways, practically every American knows that both Lincoln and Kennedy were elected as president and later on assassinated. Let's also not forget that they were both shot in the head, the back of the head, while their wives were there. Let's rewind a bit and go over the similarities before they were president. Both of them served in the military and both studied law. Even aspects about their family were the same. They were each named after their grandfathers and had 4 children, and both of them had 2 kids pass away at an early age. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. JFK was elected to Congress in 1946. How about their presidencies? Lincoln won the presidential election in 1860, and his inauguration was held on March 4, 1861. Kennedy won the election in 1960, and his inauguration was held on January 20th, 1961. Okay, these aren't that crazy, just happen to be like this. But how about these facts? Both their vice presidents and successors were Southern Democrats named Johnson, and both were born in 08. Andrew Johnson was born on December 29, 1808. Lyndon Johnson was born on August 27, 1908. Both had bodyguards named William. The craziest thing is both bodyguards named died within 48 hours of being aged 75 years, 5 months. I can actually go on and on about the coincidences, but let's not. It's just chance, right? Number 1. 2 Dennis equals more menace. How many of you guys know that there are actually 2 Dennis the Menaces? Dennis the Menace is an American comic strip drawn by Hank Ketchum that revolves around a blonde-haired boy with a penchant for mischief named Dennis. The comic strip was first released in March 12, 1951. However, a similar comic series called Dennis the Menace and Gnasher by David Law also began being published in the UK on March 12, 1951. You'd probably say that it's not a big of a coincidence because it totally seems like someone copied the other person and they were in a race to see who could get out the strip first. But if you go through the elements of both the comics, you begin to realize that they aren't copied at all. It's a genuine, crazy coincidence. Not only did the two creators have no way of knowing what the other was working on, as information didn't travel at the speed of email back in those days, but the two characters are actually extremely different. The UK version is a true menace, a mean-spirited boy who likes to cause trouble, and the US version is a happy-go-lucky kid that causes trouble without intending to. They also have pet dogs, which really is an extremely normal thing for kids to have, but in light of the other commonalities, it just adds to the coincidence. Dennis has become the archetype of a mischievous boy, even if it's a little unfair to all the Dennises in the world. Both the creators chose to allow each other to work on their own comics, and both have had success with each of their comics. Here's what's next. First, he was determined to put his money to use how he saw fit. He felt compelled to help people, but only to the people he felt really deserved help. But he still found it really hard to say no to thousands and thousands of letters asking him for help. Wow, thousands of